the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
Today on Morning Air, we're diving into a really interesting moment in church history, something that we've never seen before. For the first time ever, the Pope has a degree in mathematics. Yes, he is a math expert. That's right. Our new Holy Father, Pope Leo, comes with a background in a field that most of us associate more with equations than with theology. But this isn't just a fun fact. It opens up a much bigger conversation about the relationship between faith and reason, something that the Catholic Church has actually embraced for centuries, even if it often gets overlooked. Joining us live from the Chicago area is Theresa Civantos Barber, the assistant editor for Aleteia, to help us unpack what this actually means and why it matters, not just for the church, but for Catholics in science, education, and everyday life.
Good morning. It's so good to be here.
I loved your article on Aleteia. It's called First Math Pope Reveals Unity of Faith and Reason. And in that article, you wrote that Pope Leo XIV is the only pope ever with a mathematics degree. Talk to us about this story and why this is really significant when you consider church history and its relationship with science.
Yes, so it's kind of incredible. Out of all of the cardinals in the conclave, he was the only one with a math degree. So it's pretty unusual, not just for popes, but for prelates and bishops and cardinals in general. And we live in a world where Christianity is so frequently mischaracterized and kind of stereotyped as being anti-science in some way. And I don't know, that might be true for some denominations, but for us as Catholics, that's not the Catholic way. We love science, and you can see this, not only in incredible writings like St. John Paul II said, faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. But you can also see this in church history and in the catechism. The catechism itself says that there can never be any real discrepancy between faith and reason for a Catholic because it is God who gave us the light of reason as well as our faith. And when you look back at history, we have these incredible Catholic scientists, like Gregor Mendel was this Augustinian monk, Augustinian like Pope Leo, might I add, who literally invented the study of genetics with his experiments on pea plants in his monastery. We have Father George Lemaitre, who was a cosmologist who basically invented the Big Bang theory that now is like this widely accepted approach, and which is very consistent with Scripture, might I add, that, wow, suddenly everything came into existence, right? And so many other examples of Catholics throughout history who celebrated intellectual inquiry and went deep into science and brought incredible new developments and new discoveries to science, very much in line with their faith and while honoring, celebrating, and appreciating our tradition as Catholics in our theology.
Well, there's no doubt that the Catholic faith is not anti-science. And I know that Pope St. John Paul II especially, he talked about that. In fact, he even wrote an entire encyclical, Fides et Ratio, about the relationship between faith and reason. Pope Benedict XVI, I remember some of the comments that he made, following in JP2's footsteps about faith and reason. So in recent years, this has been something that has been talked about by our Holy Fathers. And, I'm sure that we're going to hear much more from Pope Leo during this new pontificate of his, given his unique and really historic math background.
Yes, and that's something that can really shape him, right? When you think about what's math like, you see the beauty of the logic of it, the precision of thought. All these churches have this orderly way of looking at the world that is so consistent with our Catholic beliefs. I used to have this teacher in middle school who the two subjects she taught were math and theology. And she said those two subjects went together so well because they were both about this logical order to the universe that can be seen and how math really reveals that aspect of God's creation. And what a gift we have as Catholics to have this beautiful theology. I remember once a professor who wasn't Catholic saying, those Catholics have an answer for everything. That there's our theology, what we believe, just all of it fits together so beautifully, like this puzzle, so consistent with math. And I believe that all of that is going to strengthen Pope Leo. And honestly, what a gift to all of us to have a Pope with this kind of rational, orderly mind where he loves, logic and structure. And that's going to be, I think, a beautiful thing for the church to appreciate and enjoy his thinking on so many subjects, but approached in that methodical and precise way.
Theresa, what do you think of this election of Pope Leo the 14th? What kind of a message does this send to the world about that harmony, that relationship between faith and reason, the fact that we have picked a successor of St. Peter the Apostle who not only knows theology, but he also knows science?
I really think it sends a message that we stand for faith and reason. He's kind of a living symbol of this unity of faith and reason that we celebrate as Catholics. And I had the chance to speak to a few mathematicians, one in Europe and one here in the United States. And both of them said these really powerful things about how our world often tries to draw this false distinction between faith and reason and act as though those things cannot be closely united. But as one of the mathematicians said, may his papacy inspire a new generation of faithful who are unafraid to seek God through both the soul and the mind. And that really sums it up. I think he stands for something. And I see that even if you look on like social media comments, I see people, I literally last night saw someone on Instagram comment on a post about him and say, am I Catholic? Like the person was joking, but also like, yes, come home, come to the church. This is the universal church of Christ, right? And I think that him being an American, him being a mathematician with this appreciation for science and reason, so many things about him I think are really speaking to our world today and hopefully calling a lot of people home to Christ. I'm certainly praying for that.
Theresa, as we look ahead, how do you think that Pope Leo the 14th's unique math perspective might influence the Church's approach to education, to science, and even to theology?
Well, I certainly hope that there is a renewed appreciation both for theology and science. I always say in our house we love science because science is something that helps us to understand the incredibleness of God's creation and go deep into it. And then at the same time, theology has this order and beauty and is something so rich that makes our whole lives better when we study it. So hopefully both things will be further appreciated by his pontificate.
Well, we walk by faith and not by sight, as St. Paul reminds us. But that doesn't mean that we have to walk, blindly. Our faith is reasonable, and I think if we take the time to actually study and see why we teach what we teach, there are reasonable explanations to everything that the Catholic Church teaches.
Yes, and I think Pope Leo's background has prepared him to respond to our world that, we struggle with this scientific materialism, this rejection of mystery and wonder. And I think that him bringing together that reason and that faith is going to really open up people's minds to consider the possibilities that are out there.
Well, fascinating topic. Where can our listeners read your article? First Math Pope Reveals Unity of Faith and Reason.
Yes, it's over on Aleteia, which is aleteia.org. And don't miss it because the mathematicians gave some great comments, and I can't even summarize those. So check those out.
As always, a joy to be with you. Thanks so much, Theresa. Theresa Civantos Barber, the assistant editor for Aleteia. Like what you just heard, share it with your family and friends. And thanks for listening.